Positivity refers to the entire system that surrounds positive emotions, the things that trigger positive emotions, the things that they unleash in us. And what we have found is that there's a particular tipping point positivity ratio above which people are naturally and automatically drawn to be more creative, resilient, more likely to flourish. Below that ratio, that tipping point ratio, people are kind of just getting by, languishing, if you will, just sort of feeling like their lives are a bit stuck. The critical tipping point ratio we found through our research is 3 to 1. The interesting thing is that most people walking around in the world have ratios that are offset to the positive, that's good, but only at about 2 to 1. So it actually takes some concerted effort to, in our busy culture and with all the things that pull us in many directions, to tip our ratios above 3 to 1. What we have found is that positive emotions change the way people think and the way they develop over time, and that what seems to be really vital is the ratio of the positive emotions that you experience in day-to-day life relative to the negative emotions that you experience in day-to-day life. And what we found mathematically is there seems to be a tipping point ratio of 3 to 1. That is that we need 3 positive emotions to lift us up for every negative emotion that drags us down. And that 3 to 1 seems to be the tipping point above which people are sort of naturally drawn to be more resilient, flourishing, more productive, and so on. The broaden and build theory of positive emotions points out the evolved adaptive significance of positive emotions, why they're good for us, why we have them in the first place. The first part, the broaden part of the theory, suggests that positive emotions open people's minds and hearts so that they're more receptive to perceptions in the environment. They literally see more of their contextual surroundings when they're experiencing a positive emotion compared to neutral states or negative emotions. And while that openness is only temporary, just like positive emotions are only temporary, as those kind of open moments accumulate and compound, they change who we are. They build our resources for the better and help us develop useful traits and skills that build our reserves for dealing with challenges in life. So whereas the evolved adaptive significance of negative emotions is sort of in the here and now, sort of fight or flight, what positive emotions do is broaden and build and change who we are in the future. The time course of the value of positive emotions is far longer than the time course of the value of negative emotions. I think it's really vital to understand the benefits that positive emotions bring both in the moment and then over time in a coaching context, in that we sometimes tend to think of positive emotions and happiness as the end goal. But what the broaden and build theory points out is that positive feelings are actually a means to the end goal, that we shouldn't be thinking of them as markers of success. They are the pathways towards success. So the more that we can increase people's abilities to self-generate positive emotions in their daily lives, it's fuel for growth, just like we need a variety of fruits and vegetables every day, up to 9. We need frequent experiences of positive emotions to grow and to be our healthiest.
Resonant leadership is on the whole more positive, and it's more relational. And in fact, we used the expression, borrowed it from physics, for our 2002 book, Primal Leadership, because we wanted to capture something that said the real essence of a great relationship with a leader is an interactive one. It's not where there's distance, where there's closeness. And as we started to look at it for the 2005 book, we really did a conceptual meta-analysis and said, what are some common experiences? Now, it's based on our own and a lot of other people's research, and right now, we're writing up an fMRI study on resonant versus dissonant leadership experiences of 50-year-olds with these different things to be able to pinpoint what are the neurological processes. But our contention is that when you are in a resonant relationship with a leader or with a spouse or partner or anybody, you will more likely experience mindfulness, hope, compassion, and at least in Western cultures, certain Western cultures, playfulness. To date, these are the experiences that we think both link the two people in a resonant relationship, including when one of them may be in a relative leadership position. But these are also 4 key experiences that the medical research is now starting to show enable the human body, mind, spirit to rejuvenate itself. And actually what we're now showing is the only thing that can help ameliorate the ravages of chronic stress, which we're all under, especially if you're in a position of responsibility, are these kind of resonant relationships. And yet so many things we encounter in life and in our organizations pull us apart from that. And in fact, Annie McKee and I titled the chapter 3 of the Resonant Leadership book, Dissonance is the Default, because we think that basically when a person is trying to do their work in their life in today's conditions, the stress gets to you. And it's not the acute stress. It's not like, oh my God, there's a product recall. It's the annoying stress, like the computer doesn't boot up fast. It's the sum total of that every day, day in, day out, that drags you down. And we are now starting to show with some of the research on different approaches to coaching, that when you coach somebody toward things that they should be attending to. So we gave 2 30-minute coaching sessions to college sophomores, one to what we call the positive emotional attractor, one to the negative. The positive emotional attractor, 30 minutes. Tell me what your life would be like in 10 years to 15 years if everything were absolutely perfect. And how did your experiences at Case Western Reserve possibly help that? The negative emotional attractor, which happened the next day or vice versa on random assignments, was not all that negative. It was very typical. Tell me about your courses. Are you doing all the assignments? Are you able to do the readings? Are you getting enough time from your instructors? Not particularly negative things, but in our theory, they put a person on the defensive. They create a sense of obligation. 5 days later, they went through fMRI scans, and we have 25 regions of interest in the brain from a random effects analysis, very conservative analysis, and 114 from a fixed effects analysis. All but 1 are showing exactly what we would have expected, that their stimulation from the positive attractor coaching of parts of the brain that are associated with more cognitive and perceptual openness. And that in the negative, which wasn't all that negative, it was more like obligation, all associated with arousal of parts of the brain that put a person into a defensive mode. And when we as an organism go into a defensive mode, we protect ourselves by closing down. We close ourselves perceptually, emotionally, and cognitively. So one of the things that we're suggesting is that, for example, in coaching, a lot of people feel it's very important to give people data. I want to show you the real thing of how you're coming across. I mean, I was in the consulting field on and off since the late 60s, and one of the things people did, even in the late 60s, is give 360 feedback or assessment centers. And it kind of became known in the field as a data dump and run, because very often you'd spend several days getting all this assessment. You'd come in for a session, the person slaps the data down in front of you, and what do you and the person do? Right away, you go to the gaps. And the assumption is that if we work on the gaps, we'll be more efficient in helping you proceed. Well, our data is now confirming what we suspect, that as soon as you focus on the data, people are socialized to protect themselves, so they'll look for the gaps. As soon as they look for the gaps, they start to close down. So you actually are then coaching people into a state of cognitive impairment. And yet, there are entire multi-billion-dollar parts of the coaching industry that are focused on this issue of give people the data and help them work on their weaknesses. And our contention is that while that's an important part of the process, if you do that first, you'll never get to somebody considering the possibilities. You'll never get to the sustainable effect. I mean, it's very similar, and it overlaps to some extent with what Barbara Fredrickson has done, with other things that Ed Desi has done, certainly Bob Keegan. But we actually think that what we're doing is making it a little more complex. It's something that professors are supposed to do, make things more complicated. But in the process, we're integrating the psychophysiological states with the emotional and behavioral.